Hello and welcome to episode 116 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I am, once again, your host, Sigmund Judge, and I'm joined once again by my great co-host, Devon Dundee. It's good to be back, Devon.
Oh man, it's so good to have you back, Sigmund. Really enjoyed getting to talk with Jonathan last week. Thanks to him for filling in, but I'm excited to get into everything Apple TV with you this week, and there's a lot to get into.
I think every time we kind of planned this episode, something new came along. And of course it would happen on recording days of all days, the announcement of the next Apple event on May the 7th at 7 a.m. Pacific, slightly earlier than we're used to. The event titled Let Loose. The artwork is incredible, as always. I think it strongly hints towards what we're expecting, which is new iPads and the new Apple Pencil. Just wondering if you've seen the animated version of the event invite and whether or not you can do that fidget with your Apple Pencil.
I am not skilled enough with my Apple Pencil to pull that off, but it is an impressive animation, and I highly recommend everyone checking it out. Also, check out the alternate artwork on Apple's website. They made 6 different logos to represent this event, all of them very sketchy and hand-drawn looking to, again, hint at what they're going to be announcing. But a lot of fun with the artwork. I love to see them do that when they do these events. And honestly, I'm just happy that they're having an event at all for these announcements.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited. I think there's going to be something more than the iPad, maybe something services related that will be announced as well. I think it's going to be really, really interesting. And of course, not only are you excited being the iPad man of this podcast, but the team at Mac Stories also very, very excited. So keep an eye on everything iPad related from Federico and his friends, including us, over on the website. Now, the thing that I'm super excited about going into this event is the idea that the iPad Pros are going to move from mini LED to OLED. And I thought it was really interesting this week that in the lead up to this event, big TV manufacturers are kind of going the other way. Not completely, but I thought it was really interesting that Sony, of all companies, teased at the end of last year that they could be completely moving away from OLED. That didn't happen. But what they did announce was their new TV, the Bravia 9, which is designed to be the brightest TV that the company have released. It's going to adopt the technology and know-how from their professional grade monitors, like the BVM HX3110. Honestly, terrible names Sony have for their products. The Bravia 9 name and the new naming for the TVs is much better. But this particular monitor is capable of achieving 4,000 nits peak brightness, and the upcoming flagship TV is said to be capable of outputting over 3,000 nits of peak brightness, and thus is offering increased accuracy for high dynamic range content and your specular highlights. In doing so, it dwarfs Apple's 2019 Pro Display XDR, which could do a peak brightness of 1,600 nits, which is probably bright enough for many eyeballs, but not all. What's interesting, I think, from a Sony perspective on this, is that it's a 50% brightness boost from last year's flagship TV. There are 3 times more dimming zones thanks to a new back panel construction, and that's headlined by new 22-bit drivers and 900 dimming zones. And based on the technology being used, there's going to be very little blooming in comparison to OLED. When it comes to OLED and mini LED, there's a fine balance, right, between black crushing, amazing contrast, lack of shadow detail. But the issue with OLED is when you get to great shadow detail, you often get this haloing, blooming effect on your specular highlights. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have to dim the specular highlights that are HDR to get your perfect blacks for OLED. But with mini LED, you don't need to do that. there seems to be a way of being able to counterbalance. And so I think this TV is probably the closest that we're going to get to an all-rounder. Obviously, every year we see enhancements all the time, but this really seems like quite a jump. And this TV is going to be available in 65, 75 inch and 85 inch, and I think the top model runs at about $6,000. But it's not just the hardware, it's a software element as well, which I thought was really, really interesting, and that is Sony calibrated modes for those looking to get closest to the creator's intent, with calibration modes not just for Dolby Vision and Atmos and Sony Pictures Core, but Netflix's adaptive calibrative mode and a Prime Video calibrated mode, with the servers at Amazon knowing exactly what you're watching, whether that's a movie, a TV show or sports, and the Bravia TV will by default apply the correct settings for that content using the Prime app API. And my first thought, knowing all of this, was that such technology is exactly what we need. And I think it serves as an indictment of where Dolby Vision is at, that everyone kind of wants to go down their own route. The problem with Dolby Vision is that it's a dynamic metadata wrapper that scene by scene, it tells the TV what the brightness should be in that scene, where to highlight on the panel, and then it's really up to the TV to process that information. And the issue is that just because the TV is processing the information, it doesn't mean it can process it well. And up until now, really the only TVs that have been able to deliver Dolby Vision are the LG OLEDs from the last few years. And what I mean by that is consistently, right? Of course, we have Dolby Vision on everything. We have Dolby Vision on Apple TV 4K. But it really depends on what the display is going to do in the end. And I think it's probably clear on what direction I'm going to go with my questions. But the first question I have is, are we excited or are we concerned, or maybe a bit of both, about what Apple have planned when it comes to the upcoming iPad Pros and how OLED will possibly compare to the previous mini LED display in terms of blooming? Because, of course, we are going a different direction on these iPads to what it looks like is going to be the direction for TVs in the future, especially when it comes to monitoring and creation, right? So I think that's interesting. And then the other question I have is, in terms of the calibration modes, what does this mean for Apple TV hardware, or the Apple TV app being the delivery service between service and display? It's kind of the middleman in that sense. Do you think this could be the final push Apple need in order to finally make a TV and once again be a pivotal part in that chain of command? Because it looks like across hardware, across software, things are really changing in the world of TVs. And it wasn't what I expected us to kind of talk about this week. But there we go.
Well, we always find a way to get back to Apple making their own TV, don't we, Sigmund?
We do. Because they should.
Exactly. It's something we would both love to see. And I think part of the reason it's something we would love to see is because Apple's always doing something so interesting in the display space. So let me go back to your first question, talking about mini LED versus OLED on the iPads. When mini LED came to the 13-inch iPad Pro, one of the big complaints that people had about it was actually the blooming. It is such a bright screen, but that contrast between the white and black can often get muddied with content that's particularly bright. And I've run into that myself. I think it's something I've gotten used to, honestly. You just kind of accept it as a part of using the device after a while. But I think really what that led people to believe was that mini LED was this intermediary technology between LCD and OLED, and that really OLED was the end goal. We've had OLED on the Apple Watch forever. We've had OLED on the iPhone for quite some time, and it seems to work really well. I don't think we see the same blooming issues and that kind of thing. I think maybe people have more concerns about burn-in and issues of that nature on the iPhone rather than blooming. It will be interesting to see if Apple's able to resolve some of those issues when the iPad goes to OLED. And then it'll be interesting to see if the industry's moving back towards mini LED. Was Apple actually ahead of the curve there? And maybe they're moving, kind of to where the puck was instead of where the puck is going? Because it seems like they're planning to move MacBooks over to OLED as well in time. So I don't know exactly where that leaves us. It seems like the entire lineup's going to end up OLED no matter what. And then the question would be, well, do they then pursue mini LED, especially if this really high brightness, 4,000 nit, my goodness, my poor eyes, they're not ready, Sigmund.
They are.
But if that content becomes the standard, well, Apple's obviously going to want to be a part of that. They love to talk about the brightness of their screens. If you've ever experienced HDR on an iPhone, Apple is all about getting that full brightness and really that full experience out of that screen. So I have to imagine that if OLED can't get there, if Apple's not able to work the technology and get it to 3,000, 4,000 nits in time, then they'll have to eventually go mini LED. But I think we're going to have OLED in the middle here. And I imagine there will be at least some positive trade-offs here, especially I do think blooming will get better on the iPad, not worse, when it goes to OLED. But who knows, maybe it could get even better with the next generation of mini LED. So I think it's a really interesting contrast that you've pointed out here between the TV industry and the way that they're moving and Apple's display technology. But one thing I've learned is when it comes to at least computer and personal computers, Apple's at the forefront of display technology. And so whatever's happening, they're going to be pursuing the best of the best and getting it to us as soon as possible. I fully trust in that. I think at this point, for what the iPad does and the sizes that it's at, OLED is the best. But if this mini LED continues to develop and get to a point where it can get down to the size and the efficiency and all that stuff that Apple needs, then I could very well see it going mini LED again in the future. And maybe one day we'll finally get that 11-inch mini LED iPad that people have been clamoring for several years now.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting also in the sense of, I thought Apple adopted mini LED on the iPads for like a power consumption point of view, because even this TV from Sony, I believe, is like a 20% less power output for everything that you're getting, which is incredible. So that's interesting. But now I think we need to talk about where the Apple TV stands when it comes to calibration and the screens talking directly to the app and content suppliers. Where does Apple go? I guess first from the Apple TV app point of view, but also the hardware. If the hardware is the middleman, so to speak, between the service and the screen, you're not going to get that kind of performance. Could there be a way of Apple delivering that? I don't think there is. And so, Apple TV? Actual TV? What are we saying?
It's a tough position to be in. I think we've seen elements of this already when it comes to matching the frame rate of content and matching the dynamic range of content. Those settings can get a little muddied and confusing, and you get issues where sometimes things don't match up quite right on the Apple TV between the content, the Apple TV, and your TV, and it can get really bad if those settings don't get set quite right, or things just don't get detected the way that they're supposed to. So this seems like it could be taking it to a whole other level if the streamers are adapting their content specifically to the screen that it's being displayed on. Then Apple is going to need some way of knowing what screen you're using in order to make that adaptation happen.
And have those partnerships in place, right?
Right. They'd have to get with the hardware makers as well as the streaming services and make sure everyone's okay with them being in the middle. And it seems like the hardware makers and the streaming services are making their own deals already. I don't know if it's possible with the HDMI 2.1 spec to somehow get some of that information out of the TV as far as what it's capable of in terms of frame rate and brightness and all of that. But I have to imagine that it's got to be easier if you just know the model of the TV and the exact specs of it to just instantly calibrate that. So Could you manually go into the Apple TV settings and tell them what TV you have? Maybe, but then Apple's having to consistently keep a list of what the TVs are and trust that the user is going to put in the right model number and all that good stuff. And again, it just could get really, really messy. So I think you and I are in agreement that the solution is Apple just has to make a TV, and we'll just keep coming up with reasons they have to make a TV until they do it. But this really is a compelling reason in terms of giving people the best experience when they're watching their shows and films, which is what the Apple TV has always been about. If your smart TV, the apps on your smart TV are able to adapt and really get you that full quality that you're paying for when you buy a nice TV, and the Apple TV is kind of having to sit at the lowest common denominator because it doesn't have access to that information and can't get those adaptive calibrations, well, then people are just going to start using their smart TV apps, even if it's not necessarily the best experience from, a chipset or speed or whatever. Really, what matters most is the quality of the stream that you're getting. So I imagine that Apple will have to somehow get involved with this. I would love to see a way for the Apple TV to get this information, or at least sample some of it where it can kind of get involved there. But I don't know that it's ever going to fully match up to going directly through the TV set.
Yep. I'm concerned, but I'm also very, very excited because I really do feel like we are on the precipice of an Apple TV actually coming to fruition after all of these years. We'll have to wait and see. Whilst we wait for our Apple TV to arrive someday, hopefully soon, Devon, we have some Apple TV Plus originals to talk about. And this week, we kick off with our highlight of the return of the big door prize. The people of Deerfield know their potential. Now they have to figure out how to use it as the Morpho machine readies them for the mysterious next phase.
People are completely upending their lives because of a machine.
And now it's saying, are you ready for the next stage?
How do we get to the next stage?
All sorts of magical things are taking place.
Cassie's becoming my right hand.
Well, if you're acting as Giorgio's right hand, you're going to have your work cut out for you.
There are endless possibilities.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Well, Devon, we're back in Deerfield. Lots and lots going on. This isn't just an exploration of oneself. It feels like there's more of a focus on the town of Deerfield and the community within it, whereas before it felt like very kind of separate stories that slowly intermingled in that first season. You've seen the first few episodes. I've seen the first of this new season premiering this week. What were your thoughts?
I completely agree with you about that community aspect, and I love that this season really picks up right where we left off at the end of season 1, with everyone together trying to figure out what's going on with this Morpho machine. Of course, it's asking, are you ready to move to the next phase? And the question is, okay, well, what is the next phase? You've got this group of all these different people who have been wondering about this machine for so long, standing around this grocery store, and really just, as they're trying to figure it out, they're just bouncing off of each other personality-wise as well. I loved jumping right back into that conversation and right back into that world. I will have to say, it took me a second to adjust back to the humor of the show, because it is a comedy as much as it is so many other things. It is, at the end of the day, supposed to make you laugh. And Giorgio himself is just his whole own kind of brand, right? He's a lot to handle on his own. And then you throw in a person like Bo in the same conversation with him, and you really just get some hilarious moments there. So I'm really excited about the comedy of it, getting back in with these characters that we spent a season with, enjoyed getting time with, but also getting to play with the dynamics between them and really see how they move forward together as they're contending with the machine that's just become a part of their lives now. They're not really questioning it as far as like whether they should be interacting with it or anything like that. They're on board with the Morpho and letting it lead the way, but they're interested to see where's it going to take them. And it leads them to tackle this really interesting question. Okay, now you spent this first season really learning what you're capable of, right? What your potential is, what you could be. But what does that mean for who you are. And of course, there are people who are happy about their potentials. There are people who are unhappy about their potentials, who maybe even try to hide what their potential is. And then there are those like Dusty, especially, who are just kind of confused about what their potential could mean. I mean, Teacher Whistler, that's going to take more than a season to figure out what that really means. And so as the Morpho takes these people into this next phase, it just takes them deeper into the exploration of themselves. I feel like the first season was really an identity crisis for so many of these characters, and the pieces are on the floor. And I'm hopeful that in season 2, we're going to get to see them pick those pieces up, put themselves together in the way that they want to be, become more of the people that they could be, and let that potential guide them, not necessarily dictate who they are, but let it guide them into who they are supposed to become. That's what I'm hoping to see in season 2 anyway.
I remember when this was first announced, and there were hints of the Big Door Prize being sci-fi driven, but when I watched the first season, it almost felt like, and I say this with all due respect, it felt like the biggest part of this was like the voyeurism that you would get from a reality TV show, watching everyone figure out what's going on. But in this second season, it feels as though, even from the very first episode, that we are diving more into the sci-fi element of this story. For example, the blue dots that are appearing, right? Another blue dot. What does it mean, Devon? And could the Morpho machine be taking these humans and morphing them into something else?
Wow, you're really going down the sci-fi route here, Sigmund. You think like a whole new species is coming out of this Morpho machine.
Maybe.
It's interesting, the blue dots. Of course, we had hints of this in season 1. Dusty noticed some blue dots on himself, and Hana was revealed at the end of the season to have some blue dots on her back. What's interesting about her is that she hasn't interacted with the machine personally. She doesn't have a card. She doesn't have her potential from the machine. So how is the machine even influencing her in that sense? It seems like the Morpho machine has some kind of special relationship with certain people, and we learn more about who that is throughout this season, and hopefully we'll learn more about what that actually means. But I think what season 1, the finale, really set up was Hana giving some more answers, because it seems like she has the most experience with it. She's got the most blue dots, right? So she must have spent the most time with the machine. And we do start to get some answers from her and her story, but I would say that at least in these first few episodes, we're actually left with a lot more to wonder about the Morpho machine than we really know. We know the blue dots are spreading, not only in terms of how many people have them, but also they're spreading on the people that they're on. We don't know what they're doing to them. Hopefully they're not toxic, right? Even if they're going to transform them into something, hopefully it's a positive thing. But I think we're just going to have to wait and see. I don't have all the answers, but I agree with you. I love that the sci-fi element's coming more to the forefront. And I think hopefully as that becomes more and more part of the story, we'll get more answers about what exactly is going on, and maybe even eventually figure out where this Morpho machine came from, because it just appeared, right? And surely someone must have put it there or made it, or someone had to plug it in, right? So I want to know about that person, how many blue dots they have, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, the second season of the Big Door Prize is available to stream beginning today on Apple TV+. We will see whether or not season 2 reaches its full potential together, and I cannot wait to recap this. But talking of potential this week, I wanted to talk about the iPhone's potential as a filmmaking tool. Because a couple of weeks ago, we got the National Association of Broadcasters show in Las Vegas. Very, very big show. Lots and lots announced across broadcasting and the industry as a whole, especially with the US elections coming up. Lots in terms of broadcasting, but also lots when it came to the iPhone. And what I thought was interesting is that from what I've heard from the show floor this year, a lot of reporters for the major news broadcasters are really switching now to iPhone and being able to deliver proxy files ready for being edited back at the studio before sending over the full res files from their phones, which I thought was incredible. And that'll be really interesting, again, when the politics kind of goes into full swing, when we have the Democrats and the Republicans with their conventions, especially in the lead up to the election later this year. But what I also thought was really interesting was just how much is going on with the iPhone this year at NAB. So, Blackmagic, of course, they are the darlings of this podcast because of their camera app for the iPhone and everything that's being done. We've talked about the camera app many a time. They delivered an update pre-NAB this year, version 1.3, which included support for audio monitoring on connected earphones, support for rack focus controls in the camera, support for 48mm lens on iPhone 14 Pro and 15 Pro, smoother animations when switching between landscape and portrait, faster project listing in media tabs, the reduction of latency for HDMI video feeds, name, reel, scene and take now displayed over HDMI during recording, and general performance and stability improvements. And honestly, maybe not the biggest update that they've had, but really up there with, I don't know how many products they announced, probably like 11 across their broadcast suite. They had like a 2.5 hour showcase, including this new cinema camera, which they're going to release at the end of this year, which can shoot 12K.
Wow.
But there's another version coming, which is going to shoot in 17K. That's the Ursa Cine line, which is going to have a full 65mm sensor, which means basically the opportunity to shoot IMAX format, right? And this is really Blackmagic going all out. Now, where this is interesting is we've kind of wondered what might come in regard to Apple Vision Pro shooting formats and what could be capable. A sensor that can shoot 17K, I think, is probably going to fit the bill. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm excited to see that technology just come to, of course, it's going to be a high-end camera, but be able to come to people that can afford it, and not just be limited to the story directors that we continuously mention on this podcast. So I thought that was really cool. There's also a couple of accessories that Blackmagic have released. The new DaVinci Resolve Micro color panel with a slot for placing your iPad in, which is very cool. And then a new DaVinci Resolve replay editor, which will be great for live productions, and I believe is also iPad compatible. So that's just from Blackmagic. Then we had Atomus, who announced the Ninja Phone for iPhone. Anyone that uses a mirrorless camera will know that most of the time, unless you like on the high-end cameras, you are shooting in compressed formats. So you've always had to use like a Ninja monitor to be able to record in ProRes direct to the monitor. Now you can use your iPhone with this accessory, the Ninja Phone, which is absolutely nuts. And yeah, I just think this is a really cool thing. There's locking mechanisms for the USB-C and the HDMI cables that need to go between the camera and the iPhone. And it's all built into this really cool custom case. That I think is going to be amazing. The other thing that I thought was interesting, and maybe this will come up for a cool use case if I can get hold of one in time for WWDC, it's all powered by a single Sony NP battery, which could be helpful for an upcoming project that's going to be announced soon. I promise the teasing will end soon, but it is coming. Now, on top of that, something that I thought was amazing, DJI, they're known for the Ronin gimbals. They announced last year with the Ronin R3 this LiDAR sensor that basically turned manual lenses into autofocus lenses using the LiDAR that, of course, we're used to on our phones and the iPad Pro to be able to autofocus with manual lenses, which I think is amazing. Last year, you needed to have the Ronin gimbal to be able to activate LiDAR. This year, the LiDAR sensor is completely standalone and it's a touch screen, so you can choose manually where you want to autofocus by touching on the screen, like you would on an iPhone, really. And so I thought that was fantastic. And then just from an iPhone specific point of view, Rode announced a new MagSafe phone cage and a magnetic mount. Of course, we've seen those kind of accessories before from the likes of Moment. And Tilta unveiled the Kronos iPhone 15 ecosystem. It's a camera cage inspired smartphone case, which is quite bulky but I think rugged is what they were going for. Along with a series of accessories, you'll have mounting options, including a locking clamp mechanism. You can enable integration with such accessories as focus side handles, a quick release USB-C hub, universal SSD holder, cooling modules, a mini LED panel and filters, and that set is in 3 different variations starting at $179 and going all the way up to the ultimate package, which is $512. So you've got to be really into your iPhone filmmaking, but of course you don't need any of this stuff, because really the camera in your pocket is the best camera you can have. And I think that's one of the cool things about this is, if you've got good lighting, you can pretty much get the best picture out of even an iPhone sensor. And that's where I want to end on, and that is aperture. Now, I think they started like 10 years ago by grips and film producers that really wanted to give back to the community. And they've got 2 lines. They've got their high-end line, and then they've got a creator line. Well, we're going to hear more from their creator line, Amaran, later on this year. But the standout for aperture this year, now that they're being used on huge productions, is this thing called an Infinimat, Devon. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's basically a matte light with an inflatable softbox.
Oh.
Right? That can be inflated within a few seconds. And basically, it can be used as a traditional thin matte light or expanded quite easily by attaching to multiple units. These are full RGB and modular, meaning you can connect them together to make huge customizable sources controllable from Sidus Link, which has also got an upgrade with an expanded Pro version that is, I believe, the same app in the App Store, but basically allows you to control any DMX fixture as well as Sidus One, which is a transceiver that works with DMX, CRMX, SACN, ArtNet and Bluetooth mesh. This is just next level stuff, because basically what you can do is you can kind of create a faux atmosphere. So if you're shooting someone and you wanted for it to look like it was outside, you could have a video that the lights could replicate of clouds overhead and a blue sky. So there's lots that you can really do with these. And whilst there isn't a price that's been announced yet for this, once this technology starts to trickle down, and it seems to trickle down pretty fast when it comes to aperture and Amaran, I think it's going to be a game changer. Magic rays of light indeed, right?
Indeed, Sigmund. I am so impressed by these announcements, and the theme that just keeps coming back to me is just in reaffirmation of what Apple said last fall when they released the iPhone 15 Pro and said, this is a real camera. Like, this can be used in productions now. And Apple have shown that themselves with their events. And I imagine this next event will be shot on iPhone, and we'll get that nice little logo at the end. Of course, we've seen the shot on iPhone series just continue to go to the next level with each iteration. And it's amazing to see. But it really seems like the industry is recognizing the work that Apple has done on the camera on the iPhone and is really embracing it as almost a democratizing force for creators to give everyone access to these incredible tools, and all these up and coming filmmakers who, don't have huge budgets to spend on lighting and all these different tools and things. If you've got an iPhone and a few lights that you can inflate and get the way you want, I mean, you're off to the races here. So I think this is the start of, I would almost say, a new era for amateur filmmaking, for people who are getting into the craft and seeing it reflected at NAB in the wider industry, seeing the way they're embracing the iPhone as a camera. I think it's just incredible to see. And I think we're going to get some amazing creations and pieces of filmic art out of it from people who would have never had access to the more expensive equipment, but they've got an iPhone and they can make their dream come true that way.
You told me that it'd been a while, but you actually attended NAB 1 year.
Yes.
When you attended, did you ever imagine that we would be at this point when it comes to filmmaking and the accessibility of filmmaking?
No, absolutely not. I walked around the show floor, and like you said, a lot of it's broadcast, and those are cameras I wouldn't even think of touching because I'd be afraid of breaking it and being on the hook for all that money. I think the thing that stuck with me most at the NAB that I went to, they were talking about NASA and some of the filmography that they were doing. So, of course, there's just incredible stuff happening in the world of filmmaking, but I never would have guessed that at an NAB just a few years down the road that the iPhone would be such a central part of what so many companies are doing. It's incredible to see, and I'm really just so excited by it.
Yeah, Vegas was packed. Many hotel rooms booked, I'm sure. And I'm guessing probably a couple of those hotel rooms debuted AirPlay integration. We've been waiting for a while. I think it was announced at Dub last year. Just over a month away now from Dub this year. It's finally happening.
That's right. Apple's solution for AirPlay in hotel rooms is now available at select IHG hotels and resorts properties in North America. Guests at participating locations can securely connect to their room's LG TV by scanning an on-screen QR code, unlocking the ability to wirelessly share video, music, photos, and more to the big screen. For a full list of locations, check out the link in the show notes. Not going to lie, Sigmund, I'm tempted to pull up that list and pick one of them and go try it out and report back on the podcast. If I had any vacations coming up, I might be looking to book one of these rooms. It seems like really cool technology, something that's going to be great to try out, and I'm happy to see that it's starting to roll out, hopefully to become more of a standard over the coming months and years.
Now, I don't use AirPlay a lot because I've got Apple TVs everywhere. However, I have been using AirPlay to an Apple TV over the last few hours to test out Delta and play all of my favorite ROMs for Nintendo consoles predominantly. So just had a quick kind of browse through what I had available and tried that. Of course, Delta is the long-awaited classic Nintendo emulator, which we have been waiting a long time. I think 10 years it's been in development, Devon. Almost instantly it hit the top of the App Store charts. The app is available for iPhone, but of course you can be installed on iPad, Mac, and Apple Vision Pro, and it supports playing games from the original NES, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and Nintendo DS. Of course, AirPlay is going to suffice for now. Do we ever think this is coming to the Apple TV? And if it is, how are we going to be able to get our ROMs over there without a browser or anything like that? What do you think?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't totally know. Of course, Delta, if you're a Patreon subscriber and you've been using it through AltStore for all this time, there is an iPad version that's in development. So there are plans to bring it to more platforms, and I have to imagine that the Apple TV would eventually be one of them. The developer Riley Testet actually has an emulator for Apple Vision Pro called GBA for VOS that he released as kind of an Easter egg on the anniversary of Delta, and that was kind of fun. Just kind of a little side project, I think, that he was working on. But yeah, I think we will see it on the Apple TV at some point. Now that it's on the App Store, I'm hoping that Riley will be able to take advantage of iCloud as a syncing system, which, of of course, wasn't available to him before because he wasn't on the App Store. And if that's possible, I have to imagine that with the APIs that are available on tvOS, that there'd be some way to sync that backend over, because right now with the current version of Delta, you can sync across different devices, your games and your save states. So I have to imagine if they could get iCloud in there, that would probably be the solution for Apple TV. And that would be really, really awesome to see.
Yeah, I was just racking my brain and thinking that I remember there was a way of, I think it was Battle Royale. You could record your gameplay and then airdrop to an iPhone or a Mac or wherever, right? That gameplay recording. I don't know if you can airdrop to an Apple TV. If you can, that would probably be the easiest way to do it. But yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, because I'm having an absolute blast. And years ago, I borrowed a Game Boy whilst I was in hospital, funnily enough, from my mum. And that Game Boy was stolen, alongside a Tetris game that my mum had no idea what it was. And for years, she's been trying to hunt it down. We finally figured it out over this past week. It's Tetris DX, and that's already loaded on her phone, and she's playing away as we speak.
That's awesome. I have seen so many people excited for Delta coming to the App Store. It's been such a long time coming. I've been telling people about it in my life. And just to see people get so excited for this whole new gaming platform coming to the iPhone. Some people think it's silly to be excited about emulation because it's been available for so long, but it hasn't been available on the devices that we carry around all the time. And so to have it now available, it really is just amazing. And I've had so much fun with it. Delta really just is such an impressive app, and huge congratulations to Riley Testett and his team for bringing it to the App Store finally. Now, it's only in the App Store outside the EU because alongside Delta, Riley also released AltStore Pal in the EU, which is a new app marketplace. That's the home of Delta for people in the EU. It costs €1.50 per year to help cover that core technology fee that Apple charges for developers of App Store marketplaces. But then it'll give you access to Delta and in the future more sources of apps, as well as Riley's Clipboard Manager for iOS, Clip, which you can access through their Patreon. So it's really cool to see the first third-party app marketplace also come in the EU. We weren't sure when we were going to see that. Of course, that process, I can't imagine it was easy to get through. It took quite some time, but they finally got that across the finish line as well. So really big week for the team at AltStore, and just huge congratulations to them.
Lastly, on the game emulation front, I'm hearing whispers that Provenance, which is another emulator, is not too far away. So lots and lots to get excited about.
Yeah, PPSSPP as well is also supposed to be coming. And those would be bringing some new platforms that Delta doesn't cover. So lots and lots to be excited about in the world of emulation. And I think this story is just beginning, so we'll be keeping an eye out for more updates and keeping everyone posted there. Elsewhere in app news, this week Bezel, the app for mirroring various Apple devices to the Mac, added support for mirroring your Apple TV. I gave this a try earlier, Sigmund, and this is very cool. Of course, you've been able to mirror your Apple TV to your Mac via QuickTime for some time now, but what Bezel does is it just really simplifies the whole process. It just finds Apple TVs on your network, and then in the menu bar, it gives you a list of them, and you just click one, and then you get the pairing code like you do with AirPlay. You enter that 4-digit code, and your Apple TV just shows up on your Mac screen. You can navigate. You can actually hear the audio coming out of your Mac, which is pretty cool.
Oh.
There's a very slight delay. Maybe that was my network, but it was awesome to see that. And you can record the screen as well, of course, as long as you're not playing anything that's copyrighted. You can actually do a local screen recording as well in Bezel. So this is really cool to see. I use Bezel mostly on my Apple Vision Pro to mirror my iPhone to the Apple Vision Pro. It's just a little bit of a clearer view than the pass-through video sometimes, especially in lower light. But Bezel is just one of those tools that's continuing to grow, and to see it integrate with the Apple TV is really cool to see. You know what else is really cool to see, Sigmund? New trailers. We love Apple original trailers. We love to see what's coming up. And this week, we got 2 great ones for series that we can't wait to see come back. Let's start with Acapulco Season 3. It's time to reconcile past mistakes and exciting new beginnings. In Acapulco, the work and play are equally hard.
It was 1985, and Las Colinas was the spot.
What's up, Memo? Did you put a window in here?
I wanted to give the illusion of light.
Don Pablo hired my sister Lucy to help with the party. What if Don Pablo picks her instead of me?
I can see through this innocent act of yours.
I suggest you back off.
More twists and turns were still to come. Shall we?
Do I have a choice?
No.
Well, I think we've said this multiple times on this podcast, but Acapulco is really the sleeping giant when it comes to comedy and family entertainment on Apple TV Plus. I wouldn't be wrong, I don't think, in saying that I think it's my favourite Apple original comedy. And that's even beating out the likes of Ted Lasso, which, of course, we loved. But there's a different energy to this that I just feel completely taken away and so engrossed in the stories that are told here. Of course, this is a coming-of-age story in more ways than one. And the trailer crept up on me because, yes, Apple original series are coming thick and fast. Feels like just yesterday we announced that there was going to be a season 3. Tell me, what did you think of this trailer?
I'm so excited to get back to Las Colinas. This is a world that I love to be in. It just makes me happy to spend time there. I love all the characters and just seeing them continue to grow, even in this trailer. It's been incredible. I think this is going to be the best season yet. I'm going to go ahead and call it. I love the different storylines that they're setting up here, especially this dynamic between Maximo and Memo's sister, where she just kind of comes out of the woodwork and starts gunning for his job, basically, this position that he's worked so hard for, and she just shows up and becomes his enemy number 1 right off the bat. It's amazing. And of course, the fact that she's his best friend's sister is going to have to be an interesting dynamic there. I think this rivalry might be even more fun than his rivalry with Hector, which we've loved to watch over the past 2 seasons. And so I can't wait to see that dynamic, how those two and their power struggle really work out. I will say, you talk about it being a coming-of-age story. We're entering a new phase for Maximo, and it's strange for me to see him wearing those Don Pablo-style shirts rather than his pool boy uniform. As I was watching the trailer, I was like, there's something different about that guy. What is it? And then I realized he's dressing, of course, for the job that he wants. And so he's trying to be the next Don Pablo, and he just looks like a mini Don Pablo walking around there. But it works for him. You know, he pulls it off. He's dapper. But really, I'm just interested to see, I think that's an external change that represents a huge change in Maximo's life. Not only his work position, but his relationship, and interesting to see what will happen with his family as well. I think this is going to be a really transitional year for him in the past. And then, of course, in current time, we're going to hopefully learn a lot more about how Maximo ends up where he does in the series as he's taking his nephew through his old stomping grounds. I love that dynamic. It never gets old, the way they swap back and forth between those two. They toe the line, I think, between those two storylines so well and really tie them together in a way that's just so satisfying. And I just really can't wait to see more of it. I do have one question after the trailer, and I'm interested to see what the answer to this is. But what is happening with Chad and that beard? Because I didn't recognize him at first. And I had to rewind it, and I was like, was that Cord Overstreet? And it was, but what a magnificent beard he's grown, and I'm very interested to see how he ended up where he ended up this season and where he goes now. So yeah, I think we're set up for a really nice season. I can't wait to get back into Acapulco when it returns Wednesday, May 1st on Apple TV+.
Well, from one coming-of-age transition to another, because we have been through it all with this couple. Of course, I'm talking about Nikki and Jason and the return of trying with season 4. We fast forward 6 years to discover that Nikki and Jason are experienced adopters, having built a lovely little nuclear family enriched by an extraordinary support network. However, as their teenage daughter Princess starts to yearn for a connection with her birth mother, Nikki and Jason find themselves confronted with the ultimate test of their parenting skills.
It's been 6 years since we adopted our 2 children, and parenting hasn't got any easier. Happy Mother's Day! Your dad had something in his eye.
When was the last time you did something for yourself without the kids?
Oh, no, I had a mammogram last week.
Life might not be an even playing field, but we can get through anything if we just keep talking.
Oh, if Karen calls, I'm not speaking to her, and neither are you.
I know I just said favourite Apple original comedy is Acapulco, but favourite Apple original British comedy, and actually I think British comedy anywhere, has been Trying. And I think it's just because of the story that's told through the writing, but also the performances. I've wept many a times to this TV show and laughed a lot as well. I think that's what's going to happen with this 4th and I'd imagine final season, although I say that quietly, final. But I am incredibly excited. What did you think of this trailer?
I think my body is preconditioned to start tearing up anytime I hit play on Trying Now, Sigmund, because I was in my feels as soon as the trailer started. And we've been on this journey with this family over 3 seasons now, going into season 4. If this is the last one, I'll say I'll be sad to see the series go, but it has been such a gift to get this much time with Nikki and Jason and to see their life in this way. I love that we're getting a time jump to kind of see where their family goes now that they've gotten to the place where they wanted to be. Of course, there's always an after Happily Ever After, and we get to see that here in season 4. But my love for the show grows more and more with time. Every season, I think it just is stronger than the last. And I feel like as I get older and start to experience my own journey of parenthood and, trying to have kids and all of that stuff, I relate even more to Nikki and Jason. Of course, their journey is unique and is their own, but it reflects so many things that people go through in real life, people that I love and myself, and really just so touching, and a subject that I think is so easy to get wrong, but they just get it right. And it's so beautiful. So I can't wait to see season 4 of Trying. It returns May 22nd on Apple TV+. We're going to get Acapulco and Trying overlapping, Sigmund. I think it might be too much for us to handle.
I think so. Get a box of tissues ready. When it comes to release news, we have quite a big piece of release news. I'm really excited about this. Apple original dark comedy series Sunny will make its global debut Wednesday, July 10th, with its first 2 of 10 episodes on Apple TV+. It stars and is executive produced by Rashida Jones, returning, of course, after a brief cameo in Silo, and, of course, the Apple original film On the Rocks, which is still a favourite of mine. This show, however, follows Rashida Jones as Susie, an American woman living in Kyoto, Japan, whose life is upended when her husband and son disappear in a mysterious plane crash. As consolation, she's given Sunny, one of a new class of domestic robots made by her husband's electronics company. Together, they uncover the dark truth of what really happened to Susie's family and become dangerously enmeshed in a world she never knew existed. I love the shots that we got. I like the art direction already. I love the look of this robot. Cannot wait until we get our first trailer and our first real look to really understand the tone of this. But yeah, looks fantastic.
Well, thankfully we don't have long to wait because it's coming in July. This is one we've heard about for so long, and to finally have the photos just feels real now that this is actually a show that's being made and one that we're going to get to see before long. I really can't wait for it either. I think it's going to be something really unique, and honestly, Rashida Jones, I'll watch anything she's in. I'm happy that she's collaborating with Apple once again on Sunny.
Another show that we were worried was just never going to happen and just never go into production, where it went into production and filming has wrapped. Of course, I'm talking of the return of Severance with its 2nd season. Really, really happy about this because not only does that mean hopefully we'll see this by the end of the year, But we mentioned in February that mid-April was when the shoot was going to finish, based off of a charity auction that Ben Stiller was giving away to visit the set of Severance. That's where we got our information. A bit of super spoofing there from us. And yeah, happy to see that we were right all along. In development, For All Mankind has been officially renewed for a 5th season. This came as no surprise, of course, but this news did come with a surprising twist, didn't it, Devon?
It really did. Apple has ordered a spin-off of the series entitled Star City, created by Ben Nadivy, Matt Walpert, and Ronald D. Moore. A robust expansion of the For All Mankind universe, Star City is a propulsive, paranoid thriller that takes us back to the key moment in the alt history retelling of the space race when the Soviet Union became the first nation to put a man on the moon. I have to say, Sigmund, Apple TV Plus is in their spin-off era. Getting lots of news of spin-offs. I think it started with Mythic Quest, and then it moved to the Monsterverse, and now we're getting For All Mankind. I'm happy to see the main series is going to keep going, but I'm really intrigued about this spin-off, getting the opposite side of the story. Of course, in Season 1 of For All Mankind, the Soviet Union are the competition in the space race, the people that the U.S. are trying to keep up with, but now we're going to get to see this whole thing from their perspective. Are you excited for this spin-off?
I really am, and I'm just excited for spin-offs in general, right? One of the big, I guess, gotcha questions always when it comes to Apple TV is, okay, but what is its established IP? Mm-hmm. It's establishing its own IP. And whilst there may be people that have not yet experienced For All Mankind, when they are ready to jump in, it's all going to be there for them, ready with spin-offs as well. So I'm super, super excited. I loved how the announcement was made as well. Very much like the Monsterverse announcement with a little teaser and then, oh wait, but there's more. Love that. And hope to see more of that soon. Now, a really interesting piece of news for Apple Originals. Variety reports that Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg are collaborating on a series adaptation of Cape Fear, which, yes, please. I own both the original and the Scorsese remake. The story, which is going to be adapted once again, but this time for Apple TV Plus, follows an infamous killer recently released from prison who is out for revenge against his former public defender. Scorsese directed, of course, the 91 remake of the original 62 film, with Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment producing. If you've not seen it yet, Devon, one of the early, very kind of unhinged Robert De Niro performances. If you've seen the meme of someone smoking in the cinema and just cackling, that is from that film. So highly recommend Cape Fear, and cannot wait for that new adaptation.
Speaking of adaptations, Sigmund, an adaptation of Taffy Brodesser-Akner's upcoming dark family drama novel, Long Island Compromise, is in development for Apple TV+. The author, whose book Fleshman is in Trouble was recently adapted to a series at Hulu, will executive produce the series alongside Susanna Grant, Sarah Timberman, and Richard Plepler. Long Island Compromise follows a suburban family and the lasting impact the patriarch's week-long kidnapping has on his wife and 3 children 40 years later. The book is out July 9th, so follow links in our show notes to pre-order it in your preferred format.
One film that wasn't a straightforward adaptation from the book was Apple original film Argylle, which of course you and Jonathan highlighted last week. I think Jonathan was quite kind compared to his Letterboxd review. Now, the film did take the #1 spot in last week's streaming movies charts, which kind of gives us a hint of Apple TV Plus subscriber growth, I think, and also kind of proves that there is an audience for family-friendly action films, no matter the kind of critic reviews. I'm still pretty strong on the fact that this was a lot of fun, and I think there's hopefully an appetite for a franchise continuation at Apple. Of course, opinions may vary, but that's mine. Yeah, I think that's a great showing for Argylle.
For sure, to be the #1 streaming film of the week, that's quite an accomplishment, something that I think a lot of people wouldn't have expected for an Apple original. in such a competitive landscape. So yeah, it's really great to see. I'm happy that people are watching Argyle. I shared my thoughts on it last week, and I'm with you. I wouldn't mind seeing more of it, and hopefully we will see some announcement about that soon. This week, Apple did announce the first 3 participants in the Apple Studios Directors Program. Maureen Barucha, Yoko Okamura, and Marshall Tyler would take part in the 6-month program, which includes masterclasses focused on building and sustaining a career as a working episodic director, opportunities to shadow directors on Apple Studios series currently in production, a one-of-a-kind experience in Apple Park tailored to inspire innovation and creativity, and the possibility of directing future episodes of shows from Apple Studios. Check out a link in the show notes to read bios of all 3 of these talented directors, whose names I imagine will appear again attached to future Apple originals.
Yeah, really, really cool. I really hope that their journeys are documented for a future Apple original, because we've already talked on this episode about iPhones and filmmaking. But that's pretty much as far as it goes in terms of, we get the odd session that kind of gives you a very brief overview of what's involved with the Today at Apple sessions. I've always longed for something a little more behind the scenes and something meaty when it came to filmmaking, especially on Apple TV Plus. So hopefully that's something we see in the future. The future is definitely bright. And the future may be even brighter, according to New York Times, who report that Apple are in talks with FIFA to secure streaming rights to a new month-long World Cup-style club tournament being hosted in the United States next year for around $1 billion. He does the Austin Powers little finger to the mouth. Meanwhile, however, The Athletic report that Apple are also among the companies vying for a portion of the NBA's streaming rights starting next year, which we've heard a few times before. Really, really exciting news when it comes to FIFA. I think especially from a technological advancement point of view, hopefully with Apple Vision Pro. We know the NBA are already looking at enhancing their live broadcasts for Apple Vision Pro as well. In general, some really, really exciting stuff going on there in the world of sports. But we round up the news this week with one quick bit of congratulations in our Apple FYC segment, which is very short this week, just to say a congratulations to this year's IFTA winner for editing, Michael Hart, for his fabulous work on Still, a Michael J. Fox movie.
Yes, congratulations indeed. Well, with the news wrapped up, Sigmund, I think it's time to talk about this week's Apple TV releases. Today we've got a great lineup, of course, the premiere of the Big Door Prize Season 2, as well as new episodes of Loot and Palm Royale. And then tomorrow we have 2 new spatial games coming to Apple Arcade. That's Crossy Road Castle and Solitaire Stories. Are you excited about these?
I'm excited about both, but honestly, I've been such a Crossy Road Castle nerd since it released. Every time there's a castle, I have to complete it. Many, many words that have been said that cannot be repeated on this podcast, trying to complete these levels. I even jumped on a couple of co-op games with Federico at the end of last year. Crossy Road Castle. Cannot wait to see what they're going to do with this when it's spatialized. So very, very cool. Also, on top of these spatial arcade games, we have new events and updates for What the Car, Japanese Rural Life Adventure, Disney Spellstruck, BioXo Arena Suit Team, which is absolutely insane. I don't know if you're playing this regularly, Devon, but I'm surprised this is on Apple Arcade, to be honest with you. I think it takes it to another level. We also have Jigsaw Puzzle by Mobility Wear Plus, Jetpack Joyride Plus, and Simon's Cat Storytime, all getting worthwhile updates. So if it's been a while since you've played one of those, now's probably the time to re-download and revisit.
On Friday, in the world of Apple Originals, we're getting new episodes of Sugar and Franklin. Then, of course, Friday Night Baseball continues this week with the St. Louis Cardinals at New York Mets at 7 p.m. Eastern and the Tampa Bay Rays at Chicago White Sox at 7:30 Eastern. Good chance to use that multi-view to check out both games at the same time if that's your thing. Saturday and Sunday, MLS Season Pass continues. Pull out that multi-view, Sigmund, because there's going to be a lot to keep up with. Of course, I'm going to keep rooting for Minnesota. Big win last weekend, Sigmund. Proud of my team.
And I'm so proud that you're keeping with it this season, Devon. Congratulations, Minnesota, and come on into Miami. Now, in terms of mini highlights, I think there's only one that we can talk about, and that is Triceratops Forest, the latest immersive Prehistoric Planet episode. I have admittedly not yet delved into Triceratops Forest, but you have. Was there anything that really stuck out to you this time round compared to the very first immersive episode from the BBC Natural History Unit and Apple?
Well, it could be because it was my first week with Apple Vision Pro, but what I remember from the first episode is it being very overwhelming and in your face. There was a lot of up close and personal encounters with the dinosaurs. You were kind of in the middle of it. And that was a cool experience. But what really stuck out to me about Triceratops Forest is how much more calm it is and almost tranquil. You're off in the distance a little bit. You're just observing this family of Triceratops as they're migrating and moving through this forest and crossing this river. It's really just nice and calm, and you're just taking it in. Of course, there's no narration, so you're kind of putting the story together as you go, but it seems like there's a couple of mothers with their calves, and they're just moseying their way through the forest. And of course, it's very pretty and awe-inspiring. And of course, the little ones are at eye level with you. They're huge. And then, of course, the mothers are just gargantuan in comparison. And it really is just so enjoyable to just sit there and listen to the sound of the stream and watch them cross and enjoy that a little bit from a distance. And of course, you get to pan left and right and take it all in and follow them across the screen and all that. And that's great. There is an action sequence. It's Prehistoric Planet. There's always an action sequence. And so you do get a little bit of that as well. It's almost like a bait and switch where you're nice and calm and then suddenly this danger comes. But really, to me, what I loved about it was just how calm and tranquil it was to watch this family move through and really just feel like you were there observing these dinosaurs and getting to see what life was like for them. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was worth the wait. I thought it was a totally different take on the world than the first episode, which we love to see some diversity there as far as the approach and the story and everything. And really what stuck out to me the most was the way I was just getting to piece the story together myself. Of course, I love David Attenborough. His narration on Prehistoric Planet is incredible. But the fact that with these episodes, you're really just observing and being a fly on the wall there in their world, not feeling like you're in your space at all or you're not learning or anything. You're just observing. And that really is an enjoyable experience. And I love that about it. So I hope you're able to check it out soon. And those who do have an Apple Vision Pro, definitely check out episode 2 of Prehistoric Planet Immersive Triceratops Forest. It's well worth a watch.
So they are our releases for this week, along with a mini highlight. But of course, we have some extras. They include a reimagination of Electric Energy, the theme song from Argyle by, I think it's a J-pop band called The Boys. Really interesting reimagination of that. And then, of course, from the same #1 movie from last week, we have a blooper reel from behind the scenes of the making of Argyle. And finally, we have this 8-hour soothing experience called Outside for Innies. No, it's not the precursor to Severance Season 2. It is, of course, a calming extra from the world of Earth Sounds. If that wasn't enough, we're going to recap very quickly a show that has just wrapped, and that is Manhunt, a conspiracy thriller about one of the best known but least understood crimes in history. Manhunt tells the astonishing story of the hunt for John Wilkes Booth in the aftermath of Abraham Lincoln's assassination, as the fate of the country hangs in the balance.
I was born with a chance to be somebody. I'm gonna be the most famous man in the whole world.
Mr. President. The Confederacy is dead. The Union is saved. The war is over.
Freedom for the South!
What happened?
The president's been shot. Witnesses are saying it was John Wilkes Booth.
Wait, the actor?
Do you know who I am? I'm a symbol.
How does a well-known actor commit murder in front of an audience of 1,500 people and escape?
Find the man that killed my husband.
This is created by Monica Beletsky, stars Tobias Menzies, Anthony Boyle, Lovie Simone, Will Harrison, and Hamish Linklater. I have yet to finish this. I have to admit, it was quite intense for me at this moment in time. But it's a show that is just brilliantly crafted. I didn't learn about John Wilkes Booth and the assassination of Abraham Lincoln in school. I guess we were kind of Eurocentric at the time, but you have. So how did this show gel with what you were taught and your experiences of this story?
I would say I knew the broad strokes of the story. You know, I guess it's not really spoilers going to American public school, but, you know, I knew how things ended up for John Wilkes Booth. I knew, you know, once he went in that barn, what was going to happen to him. So as far as that goes, I knew the very broad strokes, but really seeing it played out in such a deep way with such a deep focus on these central characters, it really was fascinating to me. Of course, we study history and we learn about these things that happened that had such a big impact, but they still feel so removed from us that it's hard to even really know that it was real people, right, who were really going through this. And so seeing it personified in this way, especially with this cast, I say it really did have a huge impact on me and gave me a much deeper appreciation for that period in our history and the players at the time and what they faced. So first of all, let me just say the cast, the performances were incredible. Tobias Menzies as Edwin Stanton, just an incredible performance. He's got so much going on. Of course, you know, he's just lost his best friend and he's fighting these huge political battles while trying to figure out who killed the president. But he's also just got these personal issues going on with his family, with his wife and her wanting him to retire. And of course, he's kind of a workaholic and can't give up until the work is done. But he also just adds these flares of personality to the character. I don't know if they're historically based or anything, but just the way he speaks, and when he finishes a sentence, his mouth keeps going for just a second. Very interesting choice there. He has to portray a character with severe asthma, which I can't imagine is easy on your body to do, and he pulls it off so well. So really just the perfect person for this role, I'd say, and for the leading actor in this series. And then Anthony Boyle as John Wilkes Booth. I mean, he just does such a great job of capturing this, I would say, probably enigmatic character in American history. We don't really know what to make of him. Of course, he did something very significant, but also very terrible. And so trying to understand his point of view, why he did what he did, and kind of how he thought about himself in the world. I was watching this right after, of course, watching Masters of the Air. So seeing Anthony Boyle in those two such different roles, it was definitely a bit of a shock to me, but he did a great job. I would say the thing that stuck out to me most about the series, of course, the assassination and the investigation and tracking down Booth is all fascinating, but what really stuck with me was the bigger political sphere and the implications of, you know, you think Abraham Lincoln, he was, of course, the president. He was a great man. He did some really influential and wonderful and powerful things, but you know, he passed away and we got a new president and we went on, right? And you can't really understand the impact of this one person, this loss of not only, of course, his life to himself and his friends and his family, but what he represented, what he stood for, what he was fighting for, and the way so much of that really just stopped with him. And it's sad. You know, it's a sad part of our history that, of course, we went through this huge civil war, and we fought to reunite the country and try to get things back on track. And then even after the war was over, there were still these forces that were trying to undermine democracy, trying to undermine the unity of our country and the ideals that we were trying to strive for. And it's just honestly just an unfortunate part of our history that, again, I was aware of, but didn't understand just how deeply his loss impacted the future of our country and the way we came out of that war, and how we continued to deal with so many of those issues, even into later in our history and even today. So seeing Edwin Stanton trying to fight for the ideals of Lincoln, trying to fight for the version of Reconstruction that they had imagined together, trying to, of course, put in place consequences for what happened, but also try to make things better for the people who suffered the most. And then seeing those things just completely undermined by the new administration and the people who came in, it's just so unfortunate. The series ends with this final line where Stanton says, "We finished the work now. We have to." And that really just stuck with me. I think that's really the message of the series. As much as it is about, again, this really interesting story of this man who killed the president and ran away and trying to understand what happened with him, really it's about the work that Lincoln was trying to do, the good that he and Stanton were trying to put forth, and the way that Stanton continued to fight to the end of his life, even after Lincoln died, and the way that really it's still our responsibility to continue that work today. And so it inspired me to want to continue that fight, to want to continue to make things better for people who are struggling and suffering, and honestly, to continue to strive for unity. That's something that obviously my country struggles with now, probably more than ever, and something that we need to deal with. It's fraught. It's hard to figure out, but I hope and I believe that in the long run, these ideals of making things better for everyone and creating a place where everyone can succeed and be equal is something that we can continue to strive for and come together on. So that's what the series really spoke to me about. That's what inspired me the most about it. I was inspired by Stanton, the way he took a stand after Lincoln passed away, and the decisions that he made in the face of the pressures that he faced. And even his life, of course, was another tragedy of history, and that he didn't get to fully accomplish what he meant to do. But the show does portray a lot of the progress that he was able to implement during his life and push for. So, yeah, very inspiring series. Such an interesting, tragic, but also I would say in an odd way, hope-inspiring part of our history that we can make things better if we strive to. And that's why I enjoy the series and why I recommend people check it out, especially people on my side of the pond who are particularly, affected by this history and still living it out today.
Well, I am 2 episodes off finishing Manhunt. You can, of course, check out all episodes now on Apple TV Plus. From set design to costume, cinematography, writing, it is the perfect miniseries. I hope one day we'll get to revisit this again. Bravo to everyone involved. Now, of course, each week we end with our up next picks and our highlights for the week in streaming. So, without further ado, what have you got for us, Devon?
I've got 2 picks this week. I'm taking the Sigmund route and using my time for multiple picks. The first is an upcoming episode of American Idol that comes out this Monday. They're going to be doing a tribute to the singer Mandisa, who we unfortunately lost last week at the age of 47. She was a contestant on American Idol season 5. She made it to the top 10 that year, but then she went on to have just massive success in the music industry as a Christian and gospel singer. She won multiple Grammys and really just made an impact on so many people and was such a light. So sad about her loss. So I was thinking about ways that people are honoring her legacy, and I saw that this American Idol episode was coming up, and I thought, okay, that's perfect. So I hope that people who were fans of hers and would like to honor her legacy will check out this next week's episode of American Idol as they tribute it to her memory. My other pick is a film that's streaming now on Netflix. It's called Freud's Last Session, and as I describe this to you, Sigmund, I imagine that you're going to realize this is the most me thing ever, probably. It is an alternate history film that depicts a fictional meeting between C.S. Lewis and someone who shares your name, Sigmund Freud.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
In the early days of World War II, where they debate issues of love, family, and the existence of God. Stars Anthony Hopkins as Freud and Matthew Good as Lewis. Also features Jodie Balfour, so there's a nice little Apple TV Plus connection there. It's based on a stage play by Mark St. Germain, which is based on the book The Question of God by Armand Nicolai. I love this genre of usually stage plays that just depict fictional conversations between these, intellectual powerhouses. Of course, being a believer, and I have a lot of respect for C.S. Lewis, loved the Narnia series growing up, and have gone on to read some of his other works as I've gotten older. Huge fan of his. And then Sigmund Freud, of course, I studied psychology in college, so he had a lot of impact on the field, and so he's someone who also just looms large in my mind. So these two people who just had such an impact in their fields and who lived at the same time, very well could have met, but as far as we know, didn't. To see them come together and have these big debates that also get into their backstories and their lives and how they became the people that they are. It looks like a fascinating film to me. I checked out the trailer, and this looks like one I definitely want to check out, and so I thought I'd recommend it. It's on Netflix.
Very, very cool. I have a couple of Anthony Hopkins films, recent films, that are on my list. This is going to get added to them. So looking forward to checking that out. Before my up next pick, I'm going to tell you about some highlights. Monkey Man is Dev Patel's directorial debut, which was initially sold to Netflix in 2021 for about $13 million. Netflix, however, then felt the film was too gritty for Indian audiences and was concerned about their reaction to the film's political commentary. So they quietly shopped it around. Jordan Peele saw the film, came on board as producer, persuaded Universal Pictures to acquire the film from Netflix for about $10 million. And following a short theatrical window, it's available this week in the TV app. Comes highly recommended, purely based on the trailer. Looks really, really cool. It's like a very gritty, politically driven superhero film. Then we have Love Lies Bleeding, which is Rose Glass's follow-up to her debut feature, Saint Maud. This follows the relationship between a reclusive gym manager played by Kristen Stewart, who is part of a crime family, as well as an ambitious bodybuilder played by Katie O'Brien. And lastly, Humane, not about the AI pin. This is actually the directorial debut by Caitlin Cronenberg and is set in the wake of an environmental collapse that has forced humanity to shed 20% of its population. A family dinner erupts into chaos when a father's plan to enlist in the government's new euthanasia program goes horribly awry. So heavy stuff. And so I wanted to kind of even it out with something quite cool. Gerald Undone, YouTube creator extraordinaire, but he does these tours of YouTubers' studios, and recently he did a tour of Adam Savage's beautifully chaotic studio. Of course, Adam Savage, known for his special effects design work, but also, the host for a long time of Mythbusters. Well, what's interesting about his YouTube setup is most of these tours that Gerald Undone does are heavily tech influenced, but Adam Savage actually uses cameras and microphones exclusively from his iPhone. And then once he's kind of done filming, he hands it off to his production team and they give him another iPhone. It's amazing. And he's more kind of interested in the hardware and the creativity of what you can do with minimal equipment. And in a way, it's a really interesting expose into his psyche and his creative mind more than it is about technology and everything else. So I just wanted to say, check this out. I think it's really cool, really inspiring. Of course, we talked about thousands of dollars worth of equipment that you can get, but really, when it comes to creativity, filmmaking, just go out and do it. Because if Adam Savage, with all of his wealth, can go out and buy a cinema camera and he decides to stick with the iPhone, there's something there. Now, of course, the big news this week was the launch of Delta. So I thought we'd round up our picks and suggestions with a couple of favourite classic games that we're playing on Delta. What was the first game that you popped in?
The first game that I popped in was Super Mario 64, my favorite game of all time. Had to play it. But what I'm actually planning to spend even more time with is a series of games that I've only ever played through once. So Super Mario 64, I could play blindfolded. Like that game, I've gone through it so many times. But in addition to the Mario platformers and the 3D games, there's always been this really great tradition of Mario RPGs. And especially on handheld, there was this series called Mario and Luigi for a long time that I just adored. And so I'm going to be playing Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga on the Game Boy Advance and Mario and Luigi Partners in Time on the Nintendo DS. These are really fun RPG games, very heavy in story, which you don't always get with Mario, and lots of really fun elements to them. So that's what I'm super excited to dig back into. I spent lots of hours playing those games growing up, so I'm excited to get back into them. What about you? What was your first game that you popped in, and what are you excited to play?
So my first game that I popped in, I think I sang along more than I played. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Oh, yeah.
Which I didn't even realize was on the Nintendo consoles because I initially played them on the PS1.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that was available. And so I decided I'm going to give that a round. And I just ended up singing along to Goldfinger Superman and Public Enemy and all sorts, kind of getting back into my music and, getting my energy levels back up now. So that's what I've been playing. What I'm really looking forward to playing, honestly, are the kind of 2D scrolling beat-em-ups like Fatal Fury, Double Dragons. They were the games of my childhood, and I want to get back to that. Of course, WWE No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000, all of those as well. So, yeah, I think we go on completely different paths when it comes to video games, especially when it comes to classic video games. But hey, that's where my bread and butter is. On that note, I think that is where we have to stop for this week. But before next week, you may want to get in contact with us, and you can do so in a multitude of ways. You can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, and you can email the show or send us an iMessage to magic@macstories.net. We will, of course, be back next week. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week.